I got it. Hashtag mouth breather. Yep, we got mouth breather. Well.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is my drawing table. By the way, this is what a first draft looks like. This is what I'm working on. Ooh, ghostly floating head. I like this look. I'm illuminated by my drawing board this morning. That's the TV over there. I hope you've all been up and working for hours as I have. Oh, you want to say it again? So it's a Cintiq, a Wacom Cintiq. It allows me to draw right on it. You see I'm wearing a cut-off little glove thing so my hand moves smoothly over the glass. I've aged well. All right, so I wanted to talk to you because I was just watching. I'm just watching the news, and I'm loving the explanations that I'm seeing, all the different ones, for why Trump won. And those of you who have been following my blog since the beginning here, you know that one of the tells for cognitive dissonance is that everybody has a different explanation of why something happened, and those explanations sound sort of logical on the surface, but if you dig down just like a little bit, they're just completely nonsense. And that's a real good way to identify a cognitive dissonance trigger. It means that people have been triggered to come up with some kind of rationalization for something they don't understand, and the human brain just grabs whatever's handy, and so people are just crafting their own movie scripts in their heads. I will give you an example. So I was just watching Karl Rove say that the reason Trump won is that he was the change candidate. And you've heard that, right? You've heard other people say that? They say, yes, it was the year of change, and Clinton didn't realize, that it was the change year, and she wasn't offering any change. And then other people go as far as saying that the change candidate has as much as an 80% chance of winning. The question I ask you is, all right, when you first hear that, you say, yeah, that sounds kind of right, because he did offer more change. People seemed to like what he was offering. So yeah, it was because he was the change candidate. That all makes perfect sense. Now let's just dig this far into that, all right? And ask yourself, the day before the election, right? Just take your mind back to the day before the election. Who was saying that Trump had an 80% chance of winning the next day during the election itself because the change candidate wins 80% of the time? Because I'm pretty sure we knew that the day before the election day, didn't we? Didn't we know that statistic? Exactly no one. Exactly no one. Breitbart, well, maybe. But I don't think anybody was saying that. So there's your tell for cognitive dissonance. Something that didn't make any sense the day before Election Day. Nothing changed except we know who won. And now suddenly, yeah, it's obvious. The change candidate wins 80% of the time. Only Bill Mitchell. You're right. Yeah, I think Bill Mitchell, and I think there were probably 10 million people in the public who also were saying it. But that doesn't make it true, right? We're all looking for a reason to explain what we just watched. And I've told you my reason. My explanation is that the biggest variable in this election was Trump's talent for persuasion. Now, some people say, oh, it's because he picked the right issues, and he knew that jobs and in the Rust Belt was a big deal, and he knew that immigration was a big deal, and I guess he just has a good sense for what people care about. No, I don't think so, because here's why. Can you imagine any other Republican with the same, just imagine another Republican running this past year with exactly the same policies as Trump? Would they have beaten Clinton? Not even close. I don't think so. If you imagine, let's say, Ted Cruz, who was pretty close to Trump in policies, do you think he would have beaten Hillary? I don't think so. And get this, if Ted Cruz had the same policies as Trump, he too would be representing a huge change. And remember, the change candidate wins 80% of the time. So would you take your same analysis and say, yeah, Trump won because he was the change candidate, and therefore extend it to every one of the Republicans and say, yeah, any one of those Republicans who got elected, whether it was Rand Paul, he would be even a bigger change, right? So why didn't we want those? Why didn't we want those other changes? And the difference is that Trump was just more persuasive, right? It had nothing to do with the fact he was offering change, because you know who else was offering change? Everyone. Bernie Sanders, every single Republican. They all offered a fairly major change, right? I mean, Sanders offered a really big change. That didn't even help him win the primary. So the idea that people were looking for change because change is somehow magically good by itself, I find absurd. Also, it didn't predict. So remember, a year ago, I said I'm going to use persuasion as my prediction lever, and I'll make all my predictions based on the talent for persuasion. That turned out to be perfectly accurate. The most persuasive person, the person who used the tools of persuasion best, won. And for a while, when Clinton was persuading better, which she was over the summer, scaring people about Trump's everything, while she was persuading better, she was way ahead in the polls, all right? But nothing changed. Trump was still the change candidate when Clinton was way ahead, in the summer. They still had the same policies, right? So I think the change thing is ridiculous. I think Trump could have won with different policies because he's that persuasive. I know some people are saying it was immigration. No one else addressed it. Not true. Not true, because I think that Ted Cruz, just as one example, and the other Republicans were also for very strong borders, but they didn't describe it the same way, right? So it was the message that got Trump over the top. It wasn't because he wanted a strong border security and the other Republicans didn't. In fact, there's probably not that much difference between what Clinton wants for border security and what Trump wants. They both want full security, right, at a reasonable cost. Who doesn't want that, right? So when you imagine that he had a different view on immigration, keep in mind that he changed his view, right? He actually had 3 different views on immigration, at least the non-Mexico immigration. No, actually in Mexico too. Yeah, he's had like 3 to 4 different policies on immigration, Trump has, just in the last year. So if you say, oh, it's because people liked his immigration plan, I would say, which one? The one where he deports every single person here without documentation? Did they love that one? Because he's not doing that one. All right. How about the one where he wasn't going to let anybody who was a Muslim into the country? Did he get elected because of that, his policy? No, because he's not doing that policy. That policy totally changed. So if you think that he got elected because of his immigration policy, you sort of have to ask yourself, which one are you talking about? All right. Yeah, he brought immigration to the table, but my point is that whatever he had championed would have been what you thought was the most important thing. All right, I'm going to say that again because this is the thing that explains it all. I believe that, well, let me give you an analogy. I used to play chess when I was a teenager with another teenager who was really, really good at chess, and I wasn't. He was sort of like just below master's level, I think. And he would just destroy me in chess until I just had a few pieces left, and he had most of his pieces left. And then he would make me this offer. He would say, I'll turn the board around, and I'll take what's left of your pieces that I've just destroyed, and I'll beat you again with half as many pieces. And I would say, ha ha ha, no way you can do that. I know you're good, but I have, if I have 3 times as many pieces on the board, I'm not going to lose. And then he would destroy me with a third of my pieces or whatever he had. That's Trump. If you could go back in time and you could say, hey, Trump, you can switch policies with anybody who's running except Clinton, because she was just more of the same candidate. You could switch with Bernie. So here's just a thought experiment. Imagine you go back in time and Trump hasn't announced and hasn't told you anything about immigration or any policies or anything like that. And instead, he took Bernie Sanders' policies and just came out and said, look, we got to fix this country and make America great again by having free education, because in the old days, everybody could go to college and not have big debts afterwards. And that's what made us great. If you want to move into the future, education is the thing, and we got to make that free and available to everybody. And by the way, we're going to have to do something about this income inequality, and I'm the best person to say this because I'm a billionaire. And if I tell you there should be an income inequality solutions, you can trust me. All right. Now, he would never say that, right? You're right. So I'm not describing something he's likely to have said. But the point is, he probably could have won with an entirely different platform. Because by the time the year was over, just as you are saying with immigration, you're going to say, well, that was the biggest issue. Immigration was never the biggest issue, not in any kind of rational world. It was never the biggest issue. But he made you think it was. I'll tell you honestly that before Trump got into the fight, I'm pretty well informed. I watch the news, I catch up pretty much every single day and usually multiple times a day. So I would have thought that border control would already be, in my top 5 issues to worry about before Trump ever got there. But it wasn't. If you had asked me to list, 10 biggest problems with the country, it wouldn't even be on my top 10. It wasn't on my radar at all. And I pay attention, I watch the news. I'm well informed relative to, the average voter, I guess. And it wasn't even on my radar. He made that one of my top 3 issues somehow, just because he kept talking about it. And he's so persuasive. I'm telling you that he could have done that with any issue. I'm telling you that he could have made a case for just about any damn thing being the most important thing we have to do. It could have been climate change. Like he could have just said, again, this is just a thought experiment. I'm not suggesting he would actually do any of this. But he could have said in the beginning of the process, look, climate change is the only thing we got to worry about. I came to that realization. I was against it, but now I think it's our most important thing. If he had been hammering that for a year and wanted to make that his big issue, you would think it was right now, and he would still get elected probably, because he would make you worry the most about whatever he wanted you to worry the most about. Immigration is the biggest problem. Well, you could argue it's one of the biggest problems, but it's also one that's being worked on in the normal course of things. The border is always being beefed up. Our vetting process is always being improved. And probably there won't be that much change. Was Nasty Woman comment persuasive? Not terribly. So what do you think about this whole this issue of, as I understand it, apparently Congress is in charge of CIA oversight, and maybe the FBI, I'm not sure how that works, or at least CIA. And the CIA refuses to tell them what information they have that they've already told the media, apparently, or leaked to the media, about who's behind the hacks. What the hell? correct me if I'm wrong, but well, let me put it another way. We have civilian oversight of the CIA, meaning Congress. Congress said, this is important, stop what you're doing and come in here and tell us what you know, because what you told us last time might be wrong, because you told the media right after that something different. You told us you didn't know who was behind the hacks specifically, or what their purpose was, I guess. But you told the media that Putin was behind it, or at least Russia was behind it, and that it had an intent of changing the result in a specific way. So if you have a CIA who is refusing to bow to their civilian masters, don't you have to fire the head of the CIA? Like today. Let me put this another way. There's a head of the CIA who works for who, I guess, would be working for Obama and would be subject to being fired by the president, right? Shouldn't President Obama fire the head of the CIA right now, like not even an hour from now? If it's true that the Congress said, come in here and explain this because it's a really big deal and the country cares, and it is a pretty big deal, and the country does care, and the CIA just said, we're busy, fired. Fired. And I'll tell you what, it doesn't matter that Obama likes, he might like the fact that they're not coming in to talk to him. He might like his head of CIA. I'm sorry, this is a coup, all right? If the CIA is manipulating the public opinion right in front of us, which is apparently what's happening, and they refuse to submit to civilian oversight, head of the CIA has got to be fired today, and Obama's got to do this. And we should be in the streets. There should be protests in the streets asking Obama to fire the head of the CIA. Now, all he has to do is, send some people over to answer some questions. So what the Congress is asking is pretty frickin' small. But I'm watching the news today, and who's asking Obama to fire the head of the CIA? And why not? Why isn't that the only thing on television today? Think about it. You're living in a country where the CIA just decided it was going to manipulate American public opinion for reasons that it doesn't want to share with its congressional oversight people. I think I'm describing this accurately. I'm not trying to put any hyperbole on this at all. I'm trying to describe this just objectively. There is civilian oversight. They've decided not to comply with it, and they are doing things that manipulate the American public in a way that is destabilizing to the republic. Head of the CIA, got to be fucking fired, and it's got to be today. He really needs to be fired today. Tomorrow is a complete abdication of government. All right, if Obama doesn't fire the head of the CIA today, really today, and I'm not talking about tomorrow. I mean today, he's got to call him in and say, pack your shit, and get out of Washington. You should actually escort the head of the CIA out of the building. Here's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see Congress walk over, whoever's in the oversight committees here. Go to Washington. They're in Washington. Go to the White House and knock on the door and interrupt whatever's happening. Just literally, just get in the car, go over there, and announce, I know we don't have a meeting with the president, but we're standing outside, and we're going to stand here until you fire the head of the CIA. Because this is essentially a coup if the CIA can do whatever the fuck it wants. Right in front of us. I mean, it's not even anything sneaky. If Congress is saying, come do this, we're your bosses and you're not doing it, that's what I saw. Tell me if I'm wrong, but that's what I saw. Then the head of the CIA has to be fired, and he has to be fired today. Waiting till tomorrow would be just horrible for the republic. All right? And the fact that Obama is not even entertaining that, as far as I can tell, is an abdication of responsibility I don't know if I've ever seen anything like this before. But think about it. Have you ever seen anything like this, where the CIA has gone rogue and won't respond to civilian oversight? That's not the sort of problem you let run until the end of the week, right? What kind of management allows that to run its course, or hey, let it just work itself out. Yeah, let's just play it cool, see what happens. No, you drag the head of the CIA into your office same day, and you tell him to pack his shit and get out of Washington. All right, and you have to do that for the benefit of the public. And by the way, the head of the CIA is probably a great guy. I don't even know if the CIA has any bad intent. I don't know any of that. In fact, I'm not even going to make any accusations that the CIA has any intent that is anything other than being good for the country. None of that really matters. What matters is we have a system that requires the CIA to answer to the Congress, and if they say they won't, the head of the CIA has to be fired, and it has to be the same day. It just has to be the same day. You can't wait till tomorrow. He's got to be gone by the end of the day. It should be on camera, too. It should be like a total perp walk, without the handcuffs. You should, if you're the president, and even if he's your guy, even if you appointed him, even if you like him, even if you think he's doing a good job, doesn't matter. You got to go over there. You got to send your people over, walk him out with his box of shit, and fire him. And then you put the second guy in charge, and you give him until that afternoon just to get over to the Congress and give his report. If the number 2 guy doesn't do it by that afternoon, you tell him to pack up his shit, put him in a car, and you send him out of Washington. And you put the number 3 guy in, and you just keep doing it. Because there is no option where we live in a country and the CIA doesn't report to its civilian overlords. Because the alternative is essentially a coup. And that looks like what's happening right now. Now, that may not be what's happening, but you can't have it look like that. Who's head of the CIA? John Brennan. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't matter who it is or what he did in the past or any of those things. You got 15 minutes. Yeah. It's a life-changing periscope. Ask yourself why the argument you just heard me give isn't all over television and the only story today. Why is that not the only story today? What is happening that's more important than the CIA deciding to ignore civilian oversight? Seriously. Is there a more important story than that today? Is anything happening that's even anywhere near that scale? And could you ever have a problem that's so easily fixed? Right? Biggest problem in the world, well, like, today anyway, biggest problem, and the easiest one to solve. You fire the head of the CIA and you walk him out of his office right now. Or, you give him till the afternoon to comply. You don't have to, if he refuses because he says they're busy, you just walk him out. It's got to be the end of him. So, if by the end of today the CIA hasn't complied with civilian oversight, then I think the citizens really do need to go to the streets. And this needs to be your top priority, because you really need to fire the head of the CIA if they won't comply to civilian oversights. And by the way, what company, in what world, what government, what company wouldn't do this and wouldn't do it the same day? I guess the thing I'm angry about is that anybody thinks we can wait till tomorrow to sort this out. Because I don't know what country or background you have in terms of experience or anything, but when you have a problem that's this easy to fix and this important, you got to get on it. Somebody asked if I talked to Jake Tapper about stuff like this. Jake and I are professional friends. We've had conversations about charity and about just going on a show, but we don't chat about the news in general. How do you fire Congress? You're not sure what I'm talking about with the CIA? The CIA apparently has to go brief Congress and is refusing to do it, or at least refusing to clarify why what they told the media was different than what they told Congress. Will the Electoral College defect? So I've been making most of my arguments about politics based on persuasion, right? Where does persuasion lead you? But I don't think that's relevant as a variable to the Electoral College stuff. I think if the Electoral College goes rogue, there's no level of persuasion that has anything to do with that. Those are just people who don't want Trump and decide to take a risk, and there's no way to put a risk on that. But I'd say the odds are low that it's going to get overturned. I think in the end, see, here's the thing. I think individuals can say to themselves, you know, if they're on their own little mind and their own little world, and they have that luxury now because they don't have to make the decision today. So in their minds, I'm sure that they're fantasizing and saying, oh, I could just vote my conscience and vote against Trump. So they may be thinking that. But when it comes right down to casting the vote, here's what they have to remember. They have to live the rest of their lives, in all likelihood, in this country. And if you were a faithless electoral college guy, if you were an electoral college representative, and you decided to ignore the will of the people in a pretty dramatic way, and then just go on with your life living among the people, you've got a real big surprise coming to you, because guess what? The people are going to tear you fucking apart. All right. Now, I think half the people will say, good work, electoral guy who was a rogue. You saved us by keeping us away from the horror that is Donald Trump. So half of the world would say, good deal, good on you. The other half of the world would end that fucking person's life and maybe kill them. I'm not suggesting that, obviously. And I'm not hoping that happens, obviously. I'm just saying that if you were, in this particular case, if you were a faithless elector, as they call them, and you didn't vote the way you were asked to vote by the voters in your own state, you could get away with it, you could change the election. But you better leave the country, because half of the country is going to make the rest of your life very difficult. So I think once people realize that, and by the way, I don't want to sound like that's some kind of threat. I'm not encouraging any kind of violence. I'm not encouraging any kind of payback. I'm just predicting. I'm just saying that that's the nature of the people in this country. Let me explain to Republicans, because I think a lot of people don't understand Republicans. You know, they get sort of they get a bad reputation. They get branded by the other side. So people imagine that, you know, the 1% of white nationalists are somehow a representative of the Republican Party. But I got to tell you, I met a ton of Trump supporters through this process. And as you can imagine, because of my favorable coverage of Trump, people who are Trump supporters open up to me in a way they would not open up to other people. So I really get to see what they're really thinking. And I got to tell you, I met a lot of Trump supporters. And I didn't meet anybody who said anything racist, like not even once. It was just like person after person after person. And racism doesn't come up. It's like it's nowhere on the radar. But you know, the public opinion on the other side is it must be 65% racist over there or something. Maybe. But I got to say, I spent a year talking to Trump supporters, and race didn't even come up. Like, it was never even a topic. I don't think there's a Trump supporter who gives a fuck about race. I mean, obviously there are, you know, but it's somewhere in the 1% or 2%. I didn't meet any. But one of the reasons that they get that bad rap is a lot of the Trump supporters are big free speech people. And so they want the right to talk about race. But I don't see any, you know, policy preferences coming out of them that look worrisome to me. Although I guess it wouldn't be worrisome to me, which would be fair. All right, I was going to make a point about that. Let me explain Republicans. So Republicans generally are very non-aggressive, at least in terms of violence. The Republican vibe is, I want my gun to protect myself, right? The Republican vibe is not, I want a gun so I can shoot my neighbor, said no Republican ever. it's all about self-defense, right? On the other side, not so much about self-defense. There's more of an offensive mind there, both socially as well as, a lot of criminals in the group. Democrats are a little more offensive. Republicans far more defensive, more patriotic, more, just more about their rights. But imagine if the Electoral College decided to throw the election to Clinton after the voters had voted. What would Republicans do then? Because remember, Republicans only respond in self-defense. I'm making a gross generalization, obviously, but how would they feel if the election was overturned by a handful of scurrilous people who had a technical right to do that, but were clearly thwarting the will of the voters? How would Republicans respond to what is effectively, again, I hate to use the word twice in one periscope, but it would be a coup? How would patriots respond to an overthrow of their legally elected president? Well, most of them would just get mad and say a lot of words, and they're not going to grab their guns and go do anything. But it's a big country. It's a big country, and if you have tens of millions of people in any political party, it doesn't take many of them, a very low percentage of them, to say, "Oh shit, this is a reason to pick up my gun because this is a coup." So if you're an Electoral College person and you're saying to yourselves, I think I want to fuck the entire Republican Party, the party that owns more guns than anybody in the world, overthrow essentially the will of the people in a democratic republic. I think I'll do that, and I'll let everybody know who I am, and then I'll just live happily in the country. After I've overthrown the will of the people, I'll go live among the patriots who own guns, and I think that'll turn out well for me. So, remember you asked me at the beginning of this rant, did I think the Electoral College would allow Trump not to win? And I said persuasion probably wouldn't be part of that. I'm changing my answer because I just sort of thought through it while I was talking. And I'm going to put myself in the shoes of those electoral people, and I'm going to say, and I don't want to sound make this sound like a suggestion, and I definitely don't want it to sound like a threat, because it's not a suggestion, it's not a threat. Keep your guns in your house, don't use them, don't threaten anybody, don't do anything. I'm just saying it's a big country, and Republicans are peaceful until it's time not to be. All right, and the time not to be is when they're threatened. When the country is overthrown, for example. If we're attacked, for example, somebody attacks your house, for example. So in self-defense, Republicans are going to pick up their guns pretty quickly, as long as it's a clear case of self-defense. If the country is overthrown, the will of the people, by the Electoral College, some percentage of Republicans who do own guns are going to see it as a revolution that they were not on board with. That's a very dangerous situation for an Electoral College person. So if you ask me, I think they're not going to overthrow the will of the voters, because doing so would be deeply dangerous to them and their families for the rest of their lives. And I don't know anybody who's brave enough to do that. Maybe some people stupid enough to do it, but put yourself in that position. All right. Let's say you were in that position. You were an Electoral College person, and you really, really hated Donald Trump, and you really thought, in your most objective mind, you thought that Hillary really needs to be the president for the good of the country. Let's say that's what you believed, and you knew that you could throw your vote to Hillary and you could make a difference, but you would also live in fear for the rest of your life. It would affect your career. It would just affect a lot of things, certainly your safety. Would you do it? I don't think you would, right? Or at least not many people would. So I'm going to say that the Electoral College will not be overthrown, because you wouldn't do something that looks like a coup, looks like a revolution that is not the will of the people. It's one thing to have a revolution that the people agree with. It's very different to having a revolution where the people literally just voted against it. All right? So you don't want to have a revolution like within weeks of the time that the public just voted not to have one, meaning that they voted for the guy who's the president-elect. You know, they thought they got what they wanted, the majority of people who voted in the Electoral College. Congress can override faithless electors. I didn't know that. Cops would shoot civilians to take up arms in some cases. Huh. All right, have I ranted enough today? So I think as a citizen, I'd be happy to wait till the end of the day for the CIA director to either resign or be fired. But after that, I would say the country's got a problem. All right, and so I'll ask directly President Obama. I know there are a lot of people in Washington who watch my periscopes. It's always freaky when I hear from them, you know, top news people and politicians and people on their campaign. Every once in a while I hear from them and say, yeah, I was watching you on Periscope. And I always think, I don't know if I would even do this if I thought people were watching. It's a strange situation. Because part of what makes this so fun is that I don't have an editor. I can do this whenever I want. I can say what I want. I don't care what anybody thinks. So that's what makes this fun. CIA watching too, no doubt. And of 1,000-ish people, there's a good chance that the CIA is watching, because I just said CIA about 500 times. And it's also in the text of this. And my guess is that they have good enough technology that they could pick that out of the internet and actually listen in to find out what people are saying about the CIA. Why wouldn't they have that capability? You know, if you know they're filtering for keywords, you got to think CIA's got to be one of the keywords the CIA filters for. Why is the CIA doing this? I don't know, but I assume that there are probably internal differences in the CIA. There may be some people who are so sure that Putin was involved that they feel they just have to get that word out, but maybe they don't have proof of the kind that the public would require. So there could be bureaucrats who are saying, look, we just don't have proof. We can't say we have proof because we don't. And there may be people who are just so seasoned CIA veterans that they just say, look, you can never get better proof than we have. You know, this is the spy world. This is as good as it gets, and it's really good, you know, for whatever reason. They might also have secret methods of, you know, tapping into Putin's communications, and they don't want to give that up. That's always a possibility. So they don't want to. So it could be that they can't say publicly the same things that they could say privately. Well, that doesn't make sense because they're saying publicly more than they're saying privately. When will Congress grow a pair? Well, I was just watching Representative King complaining about the CIA and not coming in. I think he's on the committee. I think he's on the committee. But if he is on the committee, I missed the part where he was calling for the CIA head to resign or for Obama to fire him, because I don't think that happened, and I'm wondering why not. Why is that not immediate grounds for firing? Sorry, I won't start that same rant again, but just to say, if the CIA head won't send his people in to talk to his own bosses, I don't know why you wait till the next day to say he should be removed from office. CIA has dirt on Congress, probably. Yeah, MSNBC is saying that Putin personally was involved. How in the world would we ever know that? Unless we're tapping into his communications. But I imagine we are. Am I angry yet? No. I'm getting there, though. Putin killed MSNBC. I managed to not watch MSNBC even once during the entire election. I always think it's sort of the joke network, the ones who stop trying, and it's just some sort of theater. You're an interpreter at one of my presentations? What? Where's my neighbor? They really hit Trump because Rachel Maddow cried. Yeah. I think Rachel Maddow is she's terrific at what she does. So skill-wise, she's about as good as you can be at your job. I'll give her that. But I think she and many people were in deep cognitive dissonance. Just to learn that so many of their people in the country would vote for Trump, it's got to be just like such a cognitive, nuclear bomb in your head, because they were so sure that the country couldn't support Trump, and then he won. They didn't know what country they were living in. So I think their heads exploded. I don't have any speeches booked, so no, 0. Is Ana Navarro going nuts? I haven't seen her lately. Yes, Christina is now VP of social media at WenHub. So you'll see more of her doing that. Why I look spooky? You're seeing me from the glow of my drawing table. So this is my Wacom Cintiq. You can't see it very well, but I draw directly on the screen. Yeah, I just started writing the new book. I'm about 8 pages in. Another 300 to go. Oh, I was just watching TV with my headphones on. I like watching the news with headphones on because because it's live and it's sort of like people just talking to you, so you don't feel like you're lonely. So I actually listen to it just for the feeling like there's somebody around. Doesn't paper and pencil feel better? It used to, but my hand got burned out using paper and pencil. Thank you for buying my book. Putin said allegations are laughable nonsense. I suppose that's what you say. I never met Ron Howard. That's an interesting question. Snickers is sleeping right next to me. Thank you. I'm glad you liked the book. I haven't heard Ben Shapiro's critiques of Trump. The new book will be about, the tentative title is The Master Persuader. So it would be an account of my year in the context of teaching you as much as I can about persuasion and how powerful it is. I've been on Tucker's show, his last show. I don't know if I don't think I'm the right kind of guest for Tucker. He likes to bring on the people who are wrong. I'm not sure he interviews people who are right, because that would be far less fun. I draw with a special stylus. So I draw on the screen. Do you want to see if I can give you a close up on the screen? Let's see. You can see that. All right, so this won't be a good picture, but I'll give you an idea of what's going on. So this is just plain Photoshop, and I'm going to show you what a rough would look like. So I'm looking at the phone at the same time I'm drawing, so that's not going to work. So the first draft is just blocking it out. making sure I know where the characters are. Hands are hard to draw, so when I'm doing a first draft, I don't draw them. I make them mittens. Well, got to 1,000, pointing too low. How about that? Here we'll have Catbert. So here was the joke. Would you rather have more days off or more pay? This is a joke based on millennial employees who say, I'd rather have time off than more pay. So the boss is saying, would you rather have more days off or more pay? Here the staff says, days off, days off, days off. And then in the end, the boss says to Catbert, head of HR, you're right, we're paying them too much. All right, so this is just standard Photoshop, and that's how that works. Those tactics, what are you talking about? Talked about McMahon on here at all? I don't know what the story is on McMahon. Is there some story about that? Thank you. So Patton Oswalt, so he's got a pretty large Twitter following. I forget how big it is. But at some point a few months ago, I came onto Patton Oswalt's radar, and I forget exactly what he said, but he basically called me an idiot or something on Twitter, and because of the things I was saying about Trump. And I just remember thinking, it's going to be so much fun when he realizes that he's wrong about, who's going to win. And I haven't heard from him, but he was the first person I thought of when Trump, actually was officially the winner. I thought, all right, let me try to draw Trump. Let's see if I can do that. I warn you that I don't do caricatures. It's actually like a special kind of a skill. Around. All right. If I were going to draw Donald Trump, give him a I think I'm just copying all the other people who have ever drawn him. He's got kind of a bird-like nose. He's got little lips. He seems like his shoulders would be like a little hunched. But he would also be giving the thumbs up thing. Let's see, if he were doing thumbs up on the side, it would be, his thumb would be here. Then if you notice that his ties are extra long, his tie actually goes down to like halfway past his crotch. I don't know what's up with that. Flag pin. You're right. So, and he also has, you imagine him with big eyebrows, don't you? There we go, bigger eyebrows. He's not that hunched. It's just when you're doing a caricature, it's more about how you register the person, and you register them different than the way they look. Does he have winged eyebrows? That pinch motion. Yeah. All right, so that's as good as I can get. By the way, when you're learning to draw cartoons, one of the things that people practice is hands. So, I'm a terrible cartoonist, but I spend tons of time drawing hands. You'll notice that in a lot of cartoons like Calvin and Hobbes, the characters just have 4 fingers, like that. Dilbert's a full-service comic, so Dilbert always has all his fingers. Sometimes the thumb doesn't show, but yeah, hands are the hardest to draw. A heart-shaped chin. Everybody's a Calvin Hobbes fan. All right, if you need to know how to draw, let me give you a little cartooning lesson right now. I should be working instead of doing this, but here's a cartoon lesson. You ready? Cartoon lesson. Lesson number 1. Start with the eyes, because your brain sort of sees the eyes as special, and it's easier to build things around the eyes. So eyes have a special place in our brain, and so you do them first. It's better to have people facing in what I call the 3/4 direction. So in other words, they're not facing directly this way, or directly this way, or directly straight at you. They're looking sort of diagonally, like he's looking off in this direction, the direction of my pen, right? That's the best for cartooning, and you'll see that I do that more than any other pose. Now, necks are very hard to draw, so I do the Gary Larson trick of giving characters no necks. All right, so I just eliminate the neck, and then I don't have to worry about it. Some of the female characters I give necks, but I try to avoid it. Now, on hair, I'll just give him a little hairline. A little bit of a suggestion of this, and there you go. Now, the way I draw on the Cintiq is a little different than the way I'm doing now. I've got the line set at dark, but that's not normally how I work. So normally how I work, if you're using Photoshop and you know what layers are, I have one layer that's my rough draft, which I have at a lower density, so it's sort of comes off as like a light gray. So that's what a first draft would look like, using the Wacom Cintiq. All right, now, so this, if you look at it here, that's my rough layer. I'm using Photoshop. So if I want to make the final, I go to the background, which is the dark layer, and I would come back to this guy, and I would zoom in a little bit so that I realize my camera work is terrible here. So I'd go in close so that I can get more accuracy, and then I would put over the draft, and I'm not trying to follow the line so much as I'm just making sure that I've blocked out the character where I want it to be. So I'm sort of redrawing it from scratch in a sense. The characters always look the same. So I'm not trying to trace my line. I'm trying to use them as a guide to make sure everything goes in the right place. Because it's really easy to draw a head, and then you realize that you made the body the wrong size for the head. All right, then, once I've drawn it in what will be more of the final form, I can do a little erasing and tweaking and fixing up any lines that didn't come out the way I wanted them to. You'll notice that the imperfections go away when it shrinks. That's part of the trick of cartooning. You draw it with imperfections at the large size, but they disappear when you shrink it down. Then I go over here and I make this, the rough draft layer go away. Get rid of its eye. I'll show you what that looks like. So if you're looking at it here, you can see it's still got the rough layer below it. But if I make that eye go away, all that's left is the finished art. And then when I'm done, I'll drag that rough layer into the trash and get rid of that. All right, so it's a Wacom Cintiq using regular Photoshop. You could use it on either Mac or Windows, either one works the same. What pen are you using? Now, the pen is a stylus that works on the computer. So if you may not have seen, I'm drawing on the computer. I'm not drawing on paper. The panels are just a format that I made once, and I just call in the same panels and then start drawing on a blank. Who taught you Photoshop? Self-taught. The squares are on the final layer, because the squares don't ever change. So those are on the finished layer from the beginning. How big is the panel? I think it's like 4 by 4, if this were a piece of paper. Before Photoshop, I just did it on paper. Brush settings. The brush setting depends entirely upon how big your image is. So for this size image, I've got a soft round 9 for my brush. And the line size, if I wanted to draw a straight line, right now I would use probably a 7. That's a 9. So the line width would probably be a 7 for this. But you need to experiment, because depending on the size of your paper, you would use a different line thickness. Well, colors are easy, because on Photoshop you just click and fill in the colors. Do a gradient background. I don't do gradient in black and white, but on the Sundays I sometimes do gradients. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this from a grayscale into a bitmap. There's a reason I do that. That's going to flatten my layers, which normally I wouldn't do, but this is just to show you. Then I'm going to go from bitmap back to grayscale. Then I'm going to go from grayscale to CMYK color. All right. So the reason I went to bitmap before I went back to grayscale and then all the way to color is that putting it to bitmap gets rid of all my soft edges and makes everything a hard pixel. So then later, when I pick my swatches, they're already out. Swatches. There's my swatches. So if I pick one of these guys, let's say I'm going to make Dogbert red or something. Whoops. So the reason it filled the entire space, is because I had an opening somewhere in the drawing. So if I go down, I will find that somewhere here there's an opening, and there it is. So this little opening caused it all to go wrong. So I'm going to close that up. And then I'm going to show you this example again. So I'm going to pick any color, make Dogbert pink. All right. Now the question you asked was gradient. And let's say I wanted to give this a gradient background. First I use the selecting tool here. And I just tap on the background once. And that you can't see it on the camera, but that has now highlighted the area around Dogbert. Now let's say I wanted this to be a gradient blue. So I'll pick the darkest part of the gradient, So wherever you start, whatever you pick is going to be the dark part. Then gradient means that it's going to start dark at the top, and then it's going to get lighter as it goes down. And we go to this tool. Underneath the bucket, if you press down the bucket, you have a gradient option. So we'll pick that, and then let me turn off my TV that just turned on magically by itself. Then, all right, so this whole thing is highlighted. I've chosen my color, that's the dark part of the gradient. I've chosen the gradient tool that's under the paint bucket on your tool. This is in Photoshop. Then, once you've got that picked, you put your pen in one place at the top, above your point where you want it to be. You draw this gradient line to the bottom, and then when I release, it's going to fill it in with a gradient that starts as a solid color at the top and then goes down. This is just the reflection of the light in the background. Oh look, I can move it around. It's like a UFO, right? So that's what that is. This is drawing not differential calculus. Is that on a separate layer? It could be on a separate layer, but I do it on the finished artwork layer. And if I don't like it, I'll just undo it. Easy when you know how. Yeah, it is pretty easy. I have to say that it takes years to figure out how to do this stuff, but once you figure it out, it's not hard. So I'm going to do the undo, back up, and then I'm going to do a little work today. All right, thanks for joining me. Watch the news. Let's watch for the CIA director to be fired today. And if not, we got to ask why not. All right, see you later.